Welcome back to the MERN Stack series. Today we're going to be continuing the authentication topic by creating a proper login route. We'll also introduce JWTs, a powerful tool for securing our user authentication. In the last video, we created our sign-up route. We learned how to use bcrypt to hash our passwords before storing them, and we also learned how to interact with the database using the user model and save new objects to our database. Let's start off creating our new route, which is going to be our login route. Now, first of all, let's begin with defining a post request. We're going to define it to the endpoint of API slash users slash login. So you can see that I've used a similar structure as we've already used up here. And then we're going to define our function. Now here, we'd like to check if the user that's trying to log in actually exists in the database. So we can just copy up this code right here because all we need to do is check whether the user who's trying to log in already exists or not. But the condition we actually apply is going to be different. So if the user exists, we actually want to allow them to log in. Otherwise, we're going to send them back an error message. So in the else, let's just do that response. And we're going to send that in a JSON format. So let's just follow the same syntax that we've been using before. There. Now that we've done the error handling, let's also handle the case of when the user actually exists. The first thing we need to do is check whether the provided password actually matches the password in the database. However, if you remember, we actually hashed our passwords before storing them inside the database. So the password that the user provides and the password in the database are going to be quite different. How are we going to compare the hash password with the password that the user provided? Well, there's a simple way to do that. All we have to do is check if the password matched, and we can do that using a bcrypt function called bcrypt compare. We're going to use await here because this is an asynchronous function, and we're going to compare. The first parameter is going to be the password that is passed to us inside the request body, and the second parameter is going to be the hashed one that we actually got here from the user. So that would be existing user dot password, because existing user is the object that we got from the database. So this is actually going to return true if the password has matched. All right, now let's put a check on that. So that would be if not password match, which means that if the password did not match according to bcrypt compare, then we actually want to return an error. In the case that the password did in fact match, we'd want to return a success message. Now that this endpoint is actually checking the credentials and responding with a success message right here, you might be wondering why we're not just stopping here. Well, the thing is, we need to create a secure and persistent connection with our users. In web development, each HTTP request that would be sent to this endpoint or to any other endpoint would be stateless, which means that each request would be independent from the other. So we need to keep a track of whether the user is logged in or not. And just this message isn't doing that for us. This is where JWT will come in. When a user logs in, rather than just giving them a message that the login was successful, we're going to provide them with a unique token, which would be a JSON web token or a JWT. This token will serve as sort of like a digital badge or password, a proof of the user's identity. And it will carry information about the user, like who they are and how long this badge or this token is actually valid. Let's go ahead and create our first JWT. First off, let's go ahead into our terminal and type in npm install JSONWebToken to install the required dependencies. While that's doing its own job, we can just go over and import it here. So let's type in const JWT equals require JSON web token. So I'm not doing the whole JSON web token as the name here because this is just easier to access. Now let's go back down into our endpoint. And over here, right before my success message, I want to actually create the token. So let's type in const token equals. Now we're going to use a function called sign from the JSONWebToken package. And this function is going to take three arguments. So the first one is going to be the payload. Now the payload is the information that we actually want to encrypt inside our JSON Web Token. Like I said, the payload is going to be a JavaScript object. So let's go ahead and create a JavaScript object right here. And we can include the username, which would be the existing user dot username. You can also go ahead and add the name, which would be like so. And then we can also add one more property, which would be our user's email. And we can add that like this. So we're not going to include the password here because that is sensitive information that should not be included in a token. However, I'm returning all the other necessary data about our user inside our token. Now, the second argument inside this JWT function is going to be our secret key. So let's define a secret key up here. I'm going to explain how this works in just a minute. The secret key is a string, and for now, I'm just going to type in something like my secret key. You can really type in anything you want in here. So let's just add the secret key. That's our second argument. And now our third argument is going to be an object with a few properties, such as we can add when we want our token to expire. So we can add that right here. That would be expires in, let's say, 2 hours. Sorry, 2 hours, like this. Okay, so this is how we're going to create our token. And then in our response, we can actually just send our token. Let me explain a little bit about how this token actually works. After our payload is encrypted inside the JWT, the token is going to look something like this. The token seems to be a series of random characters, but it has two dots in the middle, which form three different parts of the token. The first part is the header, which includes information about the hashing algorithm and the type of the token. The second one is going to be the payload. So the payload, which here is highlighted in pink, actually includes the data that we sent inside the token. In our case, we sent the name, email, and username of the user inside our payload. And the last part is what's used to actually verify the signature, and this is where our secret key comes in. We use the same secret key to encode the function, and then if we use the exact same secret key to decode it, we'll get our payload back. So we can actually retrieve that information from this hashed token or from this encoded data. Now let's test our login route using Thunder Client. If we want to do this, we'll need the email and password or the username and password of an existing user. If we go over into MongoDB, we can't actually use the password from here because this is the hashed password. So you'd better remember what passwords you kept while creating your users. In my case, I'm just going to go over into this request that I used, and I had the message that the users created successfully, which means I can use these credentials right here. If I want to save this information for later, I can use Thunder Client to save this request to a collection. So let's click Save to Collection. Let's name this, for example, Sign Up Request. And we can create a new collection for this. So let's just name our collection MERN Application. And let's hit Save. And now if we go over into the collections, we can view our sign up request right here. And this information will be available to us even if we close VS Code and close all of these tabs. So that is great. Now let's go over and use this information. So we have John Doe 2 and the password is John123. So let's create a new request. And we're going to send a post request to localhost 3000 slash, sorry, let's write in slash API slash users slash login. And inside our request body, let's add some JSON content. Here we have our username, which is going to be John Doe 2. And our password is going to be John123. Let's hit send. Okay, our server isn't running. I always forget to run the server. Let's hit send. And right here we have our token. We can clearly see the three parts of it separated by a dot. And now you'd actually want to save this token as well. So for future use, because this is our logged in token. So let's just copy that. And you might want to save it in a safe place. For example, you can put it in your sticky notes because we'll be using this token later. Let's also go ahead and save this request. Go over to Thunder Client and save this to our collection. There we go. So we can go back over into our collection and we can see this login right here. And this is going to be really useful to us in future endpoint testing. That is all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you were able to understand how JWTs work. See you in the next video. That is all for today. Happy coding!